When my mother sent the text, family dinner, Sunday at 7 p.m., no excuses. She attached a screenshot of a news article reporting that my cybersecurity firm had just hit a $940 million valuation. 10 years earlier, she and my father had changed the passwords to my server room, locked me out of my own bank accounts, and handed every single client list from my first startup over to my golden child sister, Chloe. They told the world I was unstable and walked away laughing while I slept in my car. But as I pulled up to their massive estate in my sports car, carrying a black leather briefcase, I wasn't going to demand an apology. I was going to deliver a legal notice that would bankrupt every single one of them by midnight. My name is Stella Hayes, and at 36 years old, people look at me and see a ruthless corporate executive. They see the designer suits, the executive boardrooms, and the security tech empire I built from scratch. But 10 years ago, I was just a starry-eyed 26-year-old who believed that blood was thicker than water. I had spent 3 grueling years building my first startup, Hayes Logistics Tech. I worked 100-hour weeks, survived on instant ramen, and poured every cent of my savings into developing custom back-end software. When the company finally started turning a massive profit, my parents, Arthur and Evelyn, stepped in. They told me I was working too hard and convinced me to bring my younger sister, Chloe, onto the business accounts as a co-signer for family oversight. I trusted them. That was my biggest mistake. Within 6 months, Arthur and Evelyn used legal loopholes in the co-signing agreement to change the locks on my server room. They froze my personal bank accounts and transferred my entire database, every single client list, proprietary algorithm, and active contract over to Chloe's newly registered company. When I tried to fight back, my mother looked me dead in the eye and said I was emotionally unstable. They launched a smear campaign telling our relatives and my business contacts that I had suffered a mental breakdown and that Chloe was stepping in to save the family legacy. They didn't just steal my company. They stripped me of my dignity. I was left completely broke, forced to sleep in the back of my beat-down 2012 Honda Civic, watching through a phone screen as Chloe took full credit for my life's work. Sleeping in the back seat of a freezing car changes a person. It burns away any lingering naivety and replaces it with cold, calculating ambition. I packed up what little I owned, drove 2,000 miles across the country, and took a brutal night shift job maintaining servers at a third-party data center. While the rest of the world slept, I coded. For 3 straight years, I devoted every spare hour to building something far bigger, faster, and more secure than anything I designed before, a revolutionary automated threat detection algorithm called Aegis Core. But I didn't just build my new enterprise. I also made sure to keep a silent eye on my old one. You see, my parents and sister were brilliant thieves, but absolute fools when it came to actual engineering. When they stole my original software platform, they never realized I had embedded a proprietary fail-safe deep within the legacy code. It wasn't a virus. It was a structural architecture flaw. It was a digital ticking time bomb designed to trigger a total system lockout after 10 years if it didn't receive a master decryption key, a key that resided exclusively in my mind. I let them enjoy their unearned luxury while I launched Hayes Cybernetics. Over the next decade, I worked relentlessly, scaling my new company from a tiny basement operation into an international powerhouse, securing infrastructure for Fortune 500 corporations. Chloe was living on borrowed time, completely unaware that the empire she stole was built on a foundation of digital sand. For 10 long years, Chloe lived like tech royalty off my stolen labor. She bought a sprawling mansion in the hills, took lavish European vacations, and paraded herself around networking galas as a self-made female founder. But under her polished exterior, the business was rotting from the inside out. Because Chloe couldn't write a single line of functional code, she relied entirely on my original 2016 software architecture, slapping band-aids over critical security vulnerabilities while charging her enterprise clients millions in annual retainer fees. She was leeching off my past genius, completely oblivious to the fact that the clock was ticking down to 0. Then the 10-year mark arrived, right on schedule. The hidden fail-safe deep within the legacy framework activated. The system began to glitch globally across 3 continents. Chloe's major corporate clients woke up to total system lockouts, corrupted databases, and catastrophic security warnings. Her client support lines were flooded with screaming executives threatening massive breach of contract lawsuits that would instantly bankrupt her entire operation. In a total panic, my mother tried calling my private cell phone 47 times in a single afternoon. When I didn't answer, she sent frantic text messages begging me to help your sister fix a tiny technical glitch for the sake of the family. I didn't reply to a single text. I simply watched from my corner office as headlines broke across major financial outlets announcing that Hayes Cybernetics had officially reached a $940 million valuation. My trap was sprung, and my family was finally forced to crawl back to the daughter they had destroyed. When my mother realized her frantic calls were going straight to voicemail, her tone shifted from desperate, pleading to arrogant entitlement. The text message hit my screen like a royal decree. Family dinner Sunday at 7 p.m. No excuses. Attached was a screenshot of the Forbes headline announcing my company's $940 million valuation. She truly believed that after 10 years of silence, a massive net worth meant I was finally ready to seek their approval again. In her twisted mind, my success wasn't a testament to my own resilience, but an asset that belonged to the family collective, a pool of money ready to be tapped to rescue her favorite daughter from total ruin. She expected me to walk through their front door as the same eager-to-please girl they had crushed a decade ago. I didn't argue. I didn't send a bitter reply. I simply typed back a single word. Understood. Instead of preparing an apology or a tearful reconciliation, I spent the next 48 hours with my lead corporate counsel and forensic accountants. We assembled an ironclad paper trail documenting the original 2016 intellectual property theft, the illegal transfer of client assets, and 10 years of severe non-compete violations. Everything was bound in a sleek black leather briefcase. On Sunday night, I pulled up to my parents' sprawling multi-million-dollar estate in a brand new matte black Porsche. Dressed in a tailored custom-fit suit that screamed absolute authority, I grabbed the briefcase from the passenger seat. I wasn't stepping onto that property as a daughter or a sister. I was walking in as the executioner of their vanity. The front door opened before I even reached the porch. My mother stood there with a practiced, radiant smile that didn't reach her cold eyes, wrapping me in a tight embrace as if the last decade of abandonment had never happened. Inside, the house was filled with the rich aroma of a catered roast, and my father held a glass of expensive scotch, greeting me with a booming voice as though I were a prodigal hero returning home. Chloe was sitting at the formal dining table, looking visibly pale and shaken, her fingers trembling slightly against her wine glass. As we sat down, my parents put on a masterclass in performance art. They laughed loudly, complimented my tailored suit, and talked about my nearly billion-dollar valuation as if my genius were a proud family trait passed down through their bloodline. Then came the main course, and with it the real reason I was summoned. My father leaned back, cleared his throat, and assumed his familiar, patronizing tone. He suggested that since we were all older and wiser, it was time to put the past behind us. He proposed a strategic alignment where I would perform a quick confidential audit of Chloe's software, patch up her minor technical glitches, and merge her client base into Hayes Cybernetics under her management. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my wine, set the glass down with a soft click, and smiled directly at my sister. I quietly explained that Chloe's platform wasn't suffering from a temporary glitch. It was undergoing a terminal architectural shutdown because it was built entirely on stolen decade-old code that now breached every federal compliance law in existence. The room fell completely silent. The smug smiles vanished from my parents' faces, replaced by a mixture of shock and sudden mounting terror. I placed the sleek black leather briefcase on the mahogany dining table, snapped the brass locks open, and retrieved 2 distinct folders. I slid folder A across the table toward my father. I told him it was a formal lawsuit drafted by my legal team for 10 years of systematic corporate fraud, back royalties, and intellectual property theft totaling $42 million. Before he could speak, I added that criminal referrals for federal wire fraud were attached to the back, ready to be filed with the Department of Justice first thing Monday morning. Then I slid folder B to Chloe. It was a legal asset transfer agreement for a total purchase price of exactly $1. In exchange for avoiding public criminal prosecution, Chloe would surrender her entire company, transfer every client contract, and hand over all corporate assets to my control. Furthermore, because my parents had leveraged their estate as collateral to secure Chloe's original business loans, refusing the offer meant immediate foreclosure on their house and total financial ruin. Chloe broke down into uncontrollable sobs, clutching her face in her hands. My mother slammed her fist on the table, screaming that I was a cold, heartless monster who was destroying her own flesh and blood. My father's hand shook uncontrollably as he flipped through the evidence, realizing that every lie, every forged signature, and every stolen dollar was documented in terrifying detail. They had spent 10 years believing they had outsmarted me, only to realize they were trapped in a corner with zero legal ground left to stand on. I gave my father exactly 60 seconds to sign the asset buyout. I watched as his pen hovered over the paper, his hands trembling so violently he could barely hold it. Realizing that the alternative was federal indictment and a permanent prison sentence, he pressed the pen to the paper and signed away the company, the client contracts, and the estate assets. By midnight, the stolen empire that had sustained my family for a decade was officially dissolved and absorbed into Hayes Cybernetics. I didn't keep their house, though. I sold my parents' former estate at market value and used every single dollar to establish a nonprofit incubator dedicated to funding and protecting underrepresented female founders in tech. I made sure their name was nowhere near it. I changed my personal phone number, blocked every email, address, and cut off all contact with Arthur, Evelyn, and Chloe permanently. They thought they had destroyed my life when they locked me out of that server room 10 years ago. They thought they had left me with nothing. But they failed to realize that the most dangerous thing you can do to a fighter is force them to start from scratch. True independence isn't about getting revenge. It's about building a life so powerful that those who tried to break you can never reach you again. Now, I'm curious about you listening to my story. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have offered them a way out or let them face the full force of the law? Comment below and let me know.